Jesus freak here. Still a bit warmer than I'd like. I'm like, well, it's still August. I think it was last week and maybe the week before that the replacement keyboard and mouse that I ordered, because the ones I had were failing. Because they're cheap, because I buy cheap ones. It came in, so I'm like, well, I give this one a try. It turns out the LED lights that the keyboard had on it were more obnoxious than the old ones, but they could mostly be disabled, leaving just a little glowy border around the edge of the keyboard. That's how I got it set up now. And it's good, You can tell it's still working. It's still, plugged into the system. But it's not obnoxious. It's like, why would he even bother buying something like that? It's a mechanical keyboard for $19.99. If your next, closest deal is a $17 membrane board, and I'd be like, I'm going $3 up for better keys, because your typical Logitech type, membranes and rubber domes feel like mush. And, this is actually, it's a $20 keyboard. You're not going to expect much, but it's a lot nicer to type on than most keyboards at that price point. So I'm like, there's more than just one factor that most people are going to consider when buying anything. They're going to try to balance, quality versus convenience versus price. And I'm like, maybe they're not real MX switches, and maybe the cable joint's a bit weak. Though it looks like they improved things on the new model, because it's got a fabric the not sure how you'd say this, but the outside of the cable is fabric instead of rubber. That might actually make it more durable in the long run. You see, they discontinued the previous model. The one that was that still had the rubber cable, and of course the cable coating, the rubber on the outside of the cable, was what was failing. I'm like, if this fabric shielding, I'm not sure you could call it shielding, because it's not really going to insulate as well as as I think it's rubber wood. But if this holds up better than rubber, I'm all for it. As for the mouse, it felt a little weird because it's a little boxier, but I'm like, how much you gonna do to mess up a cheap mouse? Now, one thing I've noticed, and I've mentioned a few times the reasons I took my Sunday morning videos and put them off on another channel. Why they're on Volcano Bible instead of here. And like I said, a lot of this has to do with the fact that I have to watch how I reflect on other parties whose material I'm using. So it becomes a bit more complicated than all. Doesn't really matter what I do on the rest of my videos. But now it does, and despite me several times, advertising switchover, looks like not a lot of the traffic made it over, and I'm lucky to have one or two people watching, and it's getting a bit demotivating, but I'm probably going to continue through the end of the lectionary cycle, which is November 2025. And most likely if things haven't picked up at that point, I'll probably discontinue it. Not because I want to, but because sometimes it's hard to find the motivation. And that might be truer at this time of the year, when, for example, my current computer is prone to random crashing, and it's more likely to crash with hotter weather, meaning it's probably a thermal issue. But dealing with anything at that level is just slightly beyond my field of expertise. I'm not a hardware person.
Wait.
So it's been like, the computer reboots so fast that it's not that big a deal when it locks up. I can turn it off, turn it back on, and in less than a minute, I'm back at the desktop. So, long as I, save frequently, I don't really lose that much in time or effort when my computer locks up. And of course, if something were to happen more significant than that, I do have a couple laptops plugged in that I can use for most what I do with my computer. They don't have the oomph that my main computer does. If I really have to, I do have my, 9-year-old machine has no hard drives in it that I could probably put back together if I had to. And in fact, have had to recommission before after decommissioning. Because I had a newer computer that replaced it when I think it was something went wrong with the power supply or something. I wound up having to get the power supply fixed and go back to it because I toasted the replacement. Though that does say, my experience with modern computers is that I don't really need inboard upgrades for anything. As long as it's got a good CPU, a decent amount of RAM, and can handle a lot of things plugged in on USB 3 ports, I'm honestly fine. But, I am going to have to start looking into something, first of all, more reliable than my current machine. Also, something with a little more oomph. I'm starting to be dealing a bit more regularly with a 1080p video, which previously only time I did that was for YouTube videos, and anything else I did at 720. But I've started doing stuff at 1080 now, so it requires a little more grunt out of the computer. Now, whether my sense of smell, my sense of taste, these kind of been coming and going a little bit. And sometimes to be mostly back, and then sometimes to go again. Since most of the issues with my sense of taste are localized to only part of my tongue, and since I've got sinus issues going on, which are a chronic problem, I'm going to say I don't think COVID's involved in this at all. There's not a non-zero chance anything, but I'm pretty sure it's not COVID. But I've had to, make a few changes to deal with the situation. Find stuff that, works better. I've been drinking cola for years. Well, cola is seriously affected by this issue. A more fruity pop isn't. So I switched to orange soda, and it turns out that I was actually relying on the caffeine in the cola. So I'm like, what other kind of soda can I buy at the $1.50 price point? Because if I want to buy the Mountain Dew, I'm not sure right now. Last I checked, it was $2.50 for a 2-liter. That's almost twice as much as I've been paying for pop, and I'm like, I can't sustain that. So I'm like, what other flavors of soda does Tops sell at the $1.50 price point? There's cola, there's diet cola, but that's NutraSweet. I don't want NutraSweet. There's 7-Up. There's orange. There's root beer. There's ginger ale. There used to be a couple others, but you can't find cherry pop anymore. You can't find the birch beer anymore. But finally, they have a clone of Dr. Pepper. And that's the key. You see, Dr. Pepper does have a slight fruity, and I think it's like, a cherry-like flavor to it. Could actually be almond. Almonds and cherries are actually related. I believe they're both prunus. Which is plum and peach genus. But I think cherries might be related to that too. But the taste associated with almond extracts is definitely, in that vein, so to speak. And so I guess I couldn't really tell you. As it so happens, though, Dr. Pepper doesn't have the effect to the extent the cola does. But it does have caffeine. So that's what I've been going with for the time being. Especially if I'm pinching pennies toward the end of the month. Anyway, I've been getting on a bit longer than usual, so I'm signing off. Jesus freak out.